found a hidden door in my garage and overheard my husband's heated call with another woman, forcing a confrontation that shattered my trust and changed my life. I never thought the perfect evening could feel so terrifyingly close. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 29 years old, and I live in a modest brick home in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's just after 6 o'clock on a Friday evening, and the last golden rays of sun filter through my living room windows, landing softly on the freshly fluffed pillows. I press my palm to the plush fabric, smoothing out a stray wrinkle as if I could iron out every imperfection in the world. I step back, taking in the tablecloth I carefully draped over the oak dining table, white linen, edged with delicate lace that belonged to my grandmother. I picture the soft glow of candlelight dancing on the faces of my husband, Mark, and his parents. Their laughter was going to fill these walls, weaving us closer after months spent with everyone scattered to their own lives. The thought makes a warm flutter in my chest. Behind me, the front door clicks, and I hear footsteps padding across the entryway. My heart stutters with happiness as I turn to see Mark beaming, arms around his father, while his mother trails a step behind with a bottle of red wine cradled lovingly in her hands. They're early. Better, I think. More time to bask in the comfort of family. "Hey, babe," Mark says, brushing his lips against my temple before his parents sweep into the living room, voices bright. "Sarah, your home is beautiful," Mrs. Thompson says, setting the wine gingerly on the table. I force a gracious smile, cheeks warming. "Thank you," I say, tilting my head. I guide them onto the sofa, pulling extra throw pillows from the closet and stacking them just so. My pulse thrums in my ears, equal parts pride and delight. Out of the corner of my eye, I spot the folding chairs in the corner of the living room. Just 2 more and everyone will have a seat. Best to grab them before the kitchen gets crowded, I think, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. I'm going to grab the extra chairs. I tell them, voice light. I step over a stray board game box and pause at the threshold of the garage. The cool air from the unfinished space drifts across my skin, carrying the faint scent of motor oil and cardboard. My finger hovers over the opener button as I imagine pulling out the extra chairs stacked at the far end. In the distance, I hear the soft hum of the refrigerator and the clink of my mother-in-law setting out glasses. Everything feels exactly as it should. Heart fluttering, I press the opener. The garage door rumbles overhead and anticipation bubbles in my chest, not just for dinner but for this perfect moment. Family gathered, laughter and wine, warmth and light. I step inside, already picturing the scene coming together. But as the door slides up, I catch a glimpse of something I've never seen before, tucked behind a stack of cardboard boxes. My breath catches. Froze the moment the light from the driveway spilled into the garage, illuminating dust motes dancing above my feet. My hand hovered over the opener, pulse pounding so loudly I feared it might echo off the concrete walls. I barely registered the thunk of the door lifting until a rush of cool, stale air brushed against my face. I stepped inside, white linen sleeves brushing against a stack of flattened cardboard boxes. The overhead bulb cast long shadows that clung to the corners. I took a careful breath, motor oil and old paint cans mixed with the faintest hint of pine from last winter's wreath still dangling by the side door. Normally, I'd weave past the lawnmower and ladders without a second thought, but tonight I paused. There, half hidden behind a row of plastic bins, was a door I'd never noticed before. Plain, unpainted, with a cold metal handle that glinted under the single bulb. My stomach flipped. Mark had shown me every inch of this house when we moved in last year. I pored over the blueprints, mapped out where I'd hang family photos, decided which corner would hold my writing desk. There was no mention of an extra door in any of those plans. I swallowed hard, brushing my fingertips against a dusty bin to steady myself, and took a step closer. The bins rattled softly. For a moment I thought I heard a faint click, like metal striking metal, coming from behind the door. My heart stumbled. "It's nothing," I murmured to myself, but the words felt hollow. I bent to retrieve one of the folding chairs stacked along the far wall, my fingers tracing the cold metal back to that mysterious door. A tightening in my chest urged me to turn and follow the sound, but I told myself I just needed to carry the chairs back. Family was in the living room, laughter spilling out through the open garage door. Mark would be setting out the salad bowls any second now. His mom would start complimenting me on the curtains. I lifted the chair, its weight heavier than I expected, as though it carried the tension in the air with it. I paused again, the chair pressed against my hip, and stared at the door. How could I have never seen it? My pulse drummed in my ears, and I felt a strange mix of dread and fascination. A faint draft slipped beneath the crack of the door, stirring loose papers stacked on a nearby shelf. My breath caught. You could hear the draft but not the source. My mind spun with possibilities. A storage room, a hidden workshop, a secret space Mark built for some surprise project. I chided myself for letting my imagination run wild. It was cold air and poor lighting playing tricks on me. Still, the door loomed. The chair felt impossibly heavy now, as if it too was warning me to stay away. I glanced toward the driveway. My father-in-law's car still sat out there, engine off. Laughter and the clink of wine glasses drifted in from the kitchen. Everything felt normal on the other side of that garage door, and yet I couldn't leave it alone. I took another step forward, breath shallow, fingertip brushing the cold handle. Whatever lay beyond that door had nothing to do with dinner, but it had everything to do with the secrets hiding in the shadows of my own home. My heart slammed against my ribs the moment I realized I was alone in the garage. I nudged the door closed with my hip, listening to the soft thunk that cut off the living room laughter. The sudden quiet roared in my ears, no humming fridge, no clink of wine glasses, just the thud of my own pulse. I steadied my breath and turned back to the unmarked door. The metal handle stared at me like a silent dare. My fingers hovered above it, sweaty even in the cool garage air. I thought about Mark calling me back for a toast. I thought about the in-laws, leaning into each other, on the sofa. Something deeper urged me forward. With deliberate calm, I twisted the handle, half expecting it to resist, to bar me from whatever lay beyond. Instead, it clicked open. The sudden click felt like a violation, as if I'd unlocked a secret chest not meant for my eyes. I pushed the door inward. It swung silently, revealing a narrow corridor no wider than a closet, its walls bare concrete and drywall seams. A single, flickering bulb dangled from the ceiling, its weak light barely spilling beyond a few paces. The air smelled musty, tinged with rust and something sweeter, stagnant perfume maybe, like a ghost's lingering memory. I swallowed, stepping through the threshold. My foot disturbed a fine layer of dust on the floor, releasing tiny clouds that swirled in the dim glow. My pulse pounded so loudly I thought I might drip sweat onto the bare bulb above. I reached out, trailing my fingertips along the rough wall. It felt colder than the garage, as though this corridor existed in a different temperature, a different world. I paused under the bulb, watching its flicker. The light hummed, then blinked out, leaving me in sudden darkness. I startled, hand flying up to my chest. The bulb sputtered back to life, casting a sickly yellow halo around me. Shadows flickered at the corridor's end, long and thin. My stomach flipped. I could see a door there too, pale wood, slightly ajar, with just a sliver of darkness beyond it. I leaned forward, heart threatening to burst, and took another step. Floorboards creaked under my weight, although they looked like concrete. The space wasn't built to be walked on, wasn't meant for feet like mine. My hand trembled as I reached the first door, where a tarnished keyhole peered up at me. No key, no obvious lock. Just a threshold waiting to be crossed. A memory flashed. The blueprints Mark showed me last year. I traced every wall with my finger, planned every storage nook and window seat. There had been nothing here. My vision blurred with doubt. Had I imagined the door in the garage? Had the corridor always been there, hiding in plain sight? The faintest whisper brushed past my ear, a soft sigh, barely more than the sound of breath. I froze, chest tight, every nerve alight. The corridor stretched out before me, silent and watchful. I wanted to flee back to the warmth of the living room lights, to pretend none of this existed. But something pulled me forward, curiosity laced with fear. My hand closed on the doorframe at the corridor's end. The whisper came again, a single, hollow sigh, and then I heard my name. My heart hammered as I pressed myself against the cold concrete wall, the single bulb's weak halo cutting the corridor in two. My gaze was fixed on the half-open door at the far end, where muffled voices drifted out, low, urgent, familiar. I edged forward, each footstep muffled against the dusty floor. Shadows pooled around me, hugging the walls as though they, too, feared what lay beyond. The corridor narrowed until I could rest my shoulder against the rough surface and peer inside without shifting my weight. My breath caught as I recognized the silhouette on the other side, Mark. He stood with his back to me, shoulders rigid, phone pressed to his ear. His voice, normally so warm, sounded cold and clipped. "No," he whispered, voice taut. "I told you it's done. She can't know." I strained to hear the other side, but there was only silence, a pregnant pause that made my scalp itch. My pulse thundered. My name cut through the quiet, low, gravelly. "Sarah," he hissed into the phone. My knees weakened. I tried to focus on the conversation. I needed proof, needed context. But every second stretched out, taut as a rubber band, and all I could do was watch. My gaze flicked to a small table tucked in the corner of the room. Framed photograph lay face up, tilted toward me. Mark's laughter shone through the glossy finish. His arm draped around another woman, her cheek pressed to his. She had dark curls cascading over her shoulders and eyes that glinted with something I'd never felt from him. Betrayal bloomed in my chest, hot, sharp. I reached out, fingertips trembling, but the floor shifted beneath me. A loose floor tile gave way with a hollow crack. My breath caught, and Mark's head snapped up. Phone lowered, and he spun toward the corridor, panic cutting through his features. "Sarah," he called, voice cracking. I froze, caught. The corridor felt impossibly long, and the distance between us felt impossible to cross. On the table, the photo gleamed maliciously, an accusation I'd unearthed by accident. 2 chairs remained abandoned by the entrance, one I'd meant to carry to the dining room. Now they mocked me, silent witnesses to my discovery. Mark's footsteps pounded as he lunged for the door, mouth open in desperate apology. Heat flooded my face, tears stinging the back of my eyes. I closed my fingers around the photograph's edge, lifting it like evidence in a trial I never wanted to preside over. "Sarah, please," he began, voice thick. But his words slashed through the stillness, hollow against my pounding heart. I stayed rooted, unable to step forward or back. The corridor yawned between us, chasm built of lies and secrets. The faint bulb flickered again, casting Mark's elongated shadow across the floor, reaching for me but never quite touching. Silence swallowed his plea. My grip tightened on the photo until I felt the paper's thin edge crease. Betrayal had faces, and this one glared back at me. I swallowed, voice caught in my throat as I steadied myself. The in-laws' laughter in the living room seemed impossibly distant now. Every step I'd taken to build this evening, every carefully chosen detail, had led me here. Mark's foot hovered at the threshold. I could see regret, panic, pleading in his eyes. But before either of us could move, the bulb overhead flickered one last time and went dark, plunging us both into smothering black. My breath hissed in the silence. I stood in the stifling dark, the photograph clutched in my hand, and realized that once the light returned, nothing would ever be the same. My hand shook so violently I nearly dropped the photograph the moment the bulb sputtered back to life. The thin paper felt impossibly heavy between my fingers, its edges digging into my skin as memories, once warm and bright, fractured into shards of betrayal. I stepped out of the corridor's threshold, dust motes dancing in the weak light. My palms were slick with sweat as I pressed the photo closer, studying the other woman's face. Lips curved in a secret smile, eyes full of knowing confidence. I'd seen that kind of smile before, just not directed at me. Memory flickered unbidden. Mark and I on our honeymoon, the way he gazed at me. That gaze now felt borrowed, stolen. I backed into the garage, breath catching in sharp stabs. The paint cans and cardboard boxes seemed to leer at me, witnesses to the life I thought we shared. I could almost hear the echo of our laughter, only it wasn't ours. It belonged in another story, one I wasn't a part of. My heart pounded so loud I thought it might crack my ribs. I sank against the cool cinderblock wall, the photo sliding from my grasp to dangle between my knees. The woman's face stared back, accusing me of ignorance. How long had this been happening? How many smiles, how many whispered phone calls had I mistaken for harmless work stress? My thoughts tumbled in a jumble. I remembered our first apartment in Durham, the way he squeezed my hand when I cried after my mother's funeral. I remembered the late-night talks in our Raleigh home, poring over job offers and renovation budgets. Did any of it matter now? Or was it all just a stage, a mask to conceal his other life? A sharp scent of jasmine drifted through the open garage door, Mark's cologne, I realized belatedly. He'd left it out to air, a trace of him lingering here even as he hid pieces of himself elsewhere. My throat burned with unshed tears and anger. I closed my eyes, remembering the day we toured houses, the hope sparkling in his eyes when we found this one. That hope felt like a lie now. I held my fist to my chest, trying to steady my racing pulse. In that moment, the distant laughter of my in-laws drifted across the lawn, carried on a warm breeze that felt cruel in its normalcy. They were inside, oblivious, celebrating a perfect evening that had never existed for me. I wiped a trembling hand across my mouth, tasting dust and regret. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Everything had shifted in that hidden corridor. The world I'd built, each pillow fluffed, each candle lit, was built on deception. I thought I knew every corner of my life. Instead, I was standing in the ruins. I slid the photo into my coat pocket, fingertips brushing the cold metal of the hidden door's handle. I was caught between two worlds, the bright living room full of laughter and wine, and this dim garage soaked in secrets. A single choice stretched before me: retreat into the warmth and pretend nothing happened, or step back through the shadows and demand the truth. My breath came in ragged bursts as I weighed the decision. The house was quiet now, every creak amplified in the stillness. I pulled in a shaky breath, steel hardening in my chest. I would face him. I turned toward the faint glow pooling at the garage entrance, anticipation and dread coiling in my gut. And in that moment, I realized the perfect evening was over, replaced by something I could never unsee. My spine went rigid as I stepped out of the corridor's gloom and into the gray light of the garage. My hand curled around Mark's phone, still warm in my pocket, heart pounding so hard I could taste it. I didn't hesitate. I would not let him twist this any longer. Mark appeared in the garage doorway, confusion etched on his face. "Sarah, what are you doing out here?" His voice was soft, hopeful. He took a half step toward me as if I might dissolve and he could scoop me back into the perfect evening he still believed in. I held up the photograph first, his arm around that other woman, her smile so intimate it sickened me. Then I pressed play on his voice message, the one I'd heard in the corridor. His words, clipped and urgent, spilled into the still air. "She can't know. Promise me you'll make her believe it's just an old friend." The replay button beckoned, but I didn't need to hear it again. Silence stretched, thick and accusing. My breath was steady, prepared. "Who is she, Mark?" I asked, voice calm but edged with ice. I watched his face go pale. He opened his mouth, then closed it. "Sarah, please," he began, but the apology faltered. I shook my head. "Don't. I held the photo closer, watching him flinch. I heard you, I saw this. My voice had the chill of inevitability. The garage felt smaller now, every tool and box bearing witness. He took a hesitant step forward. I can explain. You think I want to hear your explanation? My fingers tightened on the phone as I held it out, speaker facing him. Say it again. Tell me why she can't know. The phone buzzed faintly in my palm. Mark's shoulders sagged. He ran a hand through his hair, guilt twisting his features. It's complicated, he whispered. I didn't plan for it to go this far. She found out I was married and I tried to fix it. Fix it? His carelessness made my stomach lurch. I pressed the phone against his chest. Did you think I'd never see this, hear you? His eyes filled with shame and something like desperation. I love you, he said, voice cracking. I swear I do. This was a mistake. Mistake, I echoed, disbelief flaring in my chest. You hid a door in our garage. You lied to me for months. Heat burned my cheeks, tears shimmering unbidden. You promised me forever. His apology tumbled out, stumbled, frantic, too little too late. I'm so sorry, he choked. I never meant to hurt you. I watched his lips move, but his words sounded distant, hollow. The chasm between us yawned wide in the stale garage air. Every apology was another brick in the wall he had built between us. I swallowed hard, exhaling slow. I need space, I said, voice soft but firm. I dropped the photo and the phone onto a rusted metal shelf. The echo of their thud sounded to my ears like finality. Mark's face fell. Sarah, please don't do this. I shook my head, turning away. You did. My footsteps carried me past the lawnmower, past the bins, back toward the open driveway. I paused at the threshold, looking back at him. Vulnerable, pleading, regret etched deep into his eyes, and I stepped out into the night air, leaving the door open between us. The soft click of the garage light switching off was my only answer. And as I walked back toward the house, I realized there was no simple return to the perfect evening I'd once imagined. I couldn't tell you how long I stood on the threshold, letting the cool night air wash over me. But when I finally stepped back into the dining room, it felt like walking into someone else's life. Candles had burned down to stubs, their flame low and unsteady, casting long, quivering shadows across the table. A platter of roast sat untouched in the center, steam curling upward as if hoping to coax laughter back into the room. My in-laws turned toward me, smiles faltering. Sarah, are you all right? My mother-in-law asked, concern softening her voice. She set down her glass of wine, the red liquid sloshing against the rim. I paused at the foot of the table, heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. My heart thudded, but my face was composed. I'm fine, thank you, I said, voice steady. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and slid into the empty chair at the head of the table, Mark's place. He hovered behind me, guilt etched into his posture, shoulders hunched like an apology. Let's begin, shall we? I said, lifting my napkin to my lap. I gestured toward the roast. Please help yourselves. My smile was polite, practiced, ice beneath velvet. Exchanged glances, but reached for their forks. The first clink of silverware against china sounded impossibly loud. I caught my father-in-law's eye and held it with an unwavering calm that surprised even me. His brow furrowed, but he nodded once, as though seeking permission to move forward, then carved a slice of meat and brought it to his mouth. Conversation started in halting, cautious phrases. The garden looks lovely this year, he said, glancing at me with a tentative warmth. All those hydrangeas. I leaned forward, resting my elbows lightly on the table. Thank you, I said. It's been a nice project for me, keeps me busy. I let the silence linger, letting them fill it. Their words came slow, talk of their trip to Charleston last month, the new golf club Mr. Thompson was joining. My replies were brief but polite, enough to sustain the illusion of normalcy. Behind me, I felt Mark shift from foot to foot. I didn't look at him. Instead, I studied the way his mother's knuckles whitened around her wine glass, how his father's jaw clenched and unclenched with each carefully chosen word. I controlled my breath, slow and measured, as if I were conducting an orchestra of tension. Midway through the meal, Mrs. Thompson reached out, her hand hovering over mine. Honey, is everything okay between you and Mark? Her voice trembled. I drew back, polite regret warming my eyes. We're working through some things, I said. I offered her a sympathetic tilt of my head, allowing just enough warmth to comfort without betraying too much. She dropped her hand, uncertainty lingering in her gaze. I cleared my throat. I'm glad you're here tonight, I said, lifting my glass. Family is important. I let the clink of my wine glass against theirs mark the moment. My smile was genuine enough, etched in steel. We ate the rest of the roast under that brittle veneer of civility. Laughter came in small bursts, light and constrained, like bubbles struggling against a thick surface. Every so often I caught Mark's eye, and he looked away before I could see the apology in them. When dessert plates were cleared and the last of the wine drained, I stood. Thank you all for coming, I said quietly, voice firm. I think I'll step outside for some fresh air. I turned and walked away from the table, leaving behind a room full of questions and unsaid words. As I crossed the porch into the cool night, I realized that although the evening had erupted into shards of betrayal, I still held the pieces in my hand, careful, unbroken, and ready for what came next. And inside, beyond the kitchen window, their faces watched me go, uncertain if the mask would ever slip again. I watched the tail lights of their car fade into the night before I let the screen door click shut behind me. The porch light spilled onto the steps. The glow felt brittle, like a thin mask over everything I knew to be real. Inside, the house was silent, no clink of dishes, no low hum of conversation, just the echo of what I'd done. Mark hovered in the foyer, shoulders slumped, eyes red-rimmed. The photo and phone still sat on the garage shelf somewhere, but I couldn't bring myself to retrieve them. Their evidence of betrayal felt too heavy to touch. I stepped into the living room, the candles long since guttered to stubs, wicks black and tapered like broken promises. "I'm sorry," he said, voice small. I closed my eyes, squeezing them shut so I wouldn't see the pleading in his face. Every apology he offered had rung hollow before. Tonight, they sounded like echoes. I took a steadying breath, noticing how my chest tightened with each inhale. "I need time and space," I said, voice calm but firm. The words felt unfamiliar on my tongue, but they carried the weight I needed them to. "I can't pretend everything's okay." His jaw clenched. "Can't we?" "No," I interrupted gently. I stepped back, creating a distance I could swallow for now. My fingertips brushed the edge of the coffee table, a lifeline to the life I was leaving behind. "I have to figure out what comes next on my own." Mark's shoulders sagged as tears slipped down his cheeks. He reached for me, but I pulled away, my resolve hardening. I'd spent too long losing pieces of myself and his secrets. Now, I reclaimed the space I'd given him by default. He opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded once, eyes fixed on the carpet. "Okay," he whispered. "I'm here when you're ready." I didn't answer. Instead, I turned toward the front door, fingertips lingering on the cold doorknob. Outside, the night air felt cool and unchanged, but I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I paused on the threshold, looking back at the warm glow spilling from the windows. Those lights had once felt like safety. Now they felt like a spotlight on my broken trust. I drew in a slow breath, shoulders straightening. "Good night," I said softly, voice steadier than I felt. Mark nodded, words lost in his throat. I stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind me, sealing us on opposite sides of a fragile wall. In the quiet that followed, I realized how empty our home had grown. I walked down the driveway under a sky heavy with stars, each one a pinprick of possibility. Scent of jasmine from the garden, a scent I once loved, felt sharp tonight, a reminder of what I'd lost. But with every step, the weight in my chest lightened just a fraction. At the end of the walk, I turned to glance back at the house. The windows glowed softly, silent witnesses to my choice. I had no map for the road ahead, no guarantee of where I'd end up. But I had this moment, this space to breathe, to decide. And as I stepped into the night, I understood that this was only the beginning of finding myself again.